Hey, welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you're here. If you are a widow and you are thinking, I just want to grasp onto something to just help me feel like I'm not crazy, that I'm not broken, and that I have someone to connect to, I hope that's going to be me. I just want you to know that you are not broken. And this journey is the hardest journey that you're going to walk. And this time with me, I hope helps. So let me just get back to the story. I had this person who I met at a widow's group, and she was very angry. She had a lot of anger that she had not been working through. She told me as we were on a walk, and she said to me, you know, I notice that you're so much further along in your journey. And that makes me kind of sad because I've wasted so much time. And I stopped and I said, what if you didn't look at it as that was wrong? It was just part of your journey. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And if you don't know me, my name is Gina. My husband died of melanoma cancer in 2024. In 2023, he was cancer-free. He had actually had his first cancer in 2020. It was a melanoma. It was on the top of his skull, and they removed a pretty big spot, but it had traveled to his lymph node. And I remember now the oncologist saying, you know, melanoma isn't if it comes back, it's when it comes back. And of course, we didn't take notice of that. Lou was feeling a lot better. So in July of 2023, he was cancer-free. He had a PET scan. He was totally cancer-free. In September, he found a spot on the back of his arm. And that spot basically was the end of him. And we didn't know that. And I will say what happened for me is that I kind of was in a state of, we're just going to do the same thing we did with the other cancer. We're just going to, you know, power through and get all the things done. Well, so he had surgery in October. November, he had an MRI. That MRI, what happened minutes after he got out of there, he was in pain. He said, I have a really bad headache. And so we wound up meeting my son for dinner. And throughout dinner, he said, yeah, I don't feel so good. My head really hurts. He goes, I think it's a sinus headache. And I was like, oh, okay. And so we went home. So that was a Saturday. Sunday, he was in so much pain. And he kept saying, oh, it's just a really bad sinus infection. There's got to be something wrong. And I said, hey, you have cancer. We're going to the ER. So Monday morning, we headed off to the ER. And he was in excruciating pain. They checked his MRI. They came in and they said, hey, you don't have cancer in your brain. We were like, oh, hallelujah. Okay. So, but the doctor was like, there's something wrong. He wound up sending us to an ophthalmologist. That ophthalmologist is who found the cancer. He said, come back tomorrow. Let me look at your MRI. As soon as we walked in, he said to me and Lou, he said, I couldn't sleep. I knew something was up. And he said, and I found it. There's a spot right behind your eye, and that is why you're in so much pain. That spot is pushing on your eye. He's like, we got to get you into surgery, and we set the stage. We're going to drive up to Portland. We're going to do all the things, go to the surgeon. But that didn't happen. They changed the plan, and they said, we're going to do radiation first, and then we'll do, the immunotherapy and all of that. And we didn't understand why the change was there. And I wish now that we would have just been like, no, we're going to get the surgery and just have his eye taken. But we didn't do that. In hindsight, Lou had cancer everywhere. So the type of cancer he had was, it was nodule melanoma. So it was just popping up everywhere within his body and lighting up his eye. And he was in so much pain. And there were moments that I kept thinking, of course, God's going to heal him. Of course, God's going to heal him. And we had rainbows at the time that were popping up all the time. And I remember my son saying, man, we haven't had this many rainbows ever. And I kept thinking, oh, that's God, and God's going to save you. And I'd run upstairs and there's a rainbow out there and God's going to heal you. And in hindsight, I think those rainbows were for us, a reminder that we aren't alone and that God is with us. But at the time, of course, I was grasping onto anything that would help me believe that Lou was not going to leave us. In, I would say, early January, my husband really started to not feel good at all. And he was just sleeping, and just, he would wake up and he would need me to put some warm cloths on his eye, and he was losing sight in that eye. And there was one moment where I came in and I noticed that this eye, he was losing sight. And he said, "Is it my other eye?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Fuck." And I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, hon." And the next day I was folding laundry at the bed, and I thought that was interesting. He was just sitting up and he couldn't see, his eyes were closed. And he said, "What you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm folding laundry." And so I was folding laundry, and I said, "Do you know what's happening to you?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm dying." And I'll never forget that moment. It's pretty beautiful, actually. And I said, "Are you scared?" And he said, "No, I'm not scared." And I went over to his side of the bed, and I just sat there with him, and we hugged, and I cried. And he said, "I'm just going to miss you the most." And I just sobbed in his arms. As time went on, what we noticed is that there was that moment where he kind of came to life, and he wasn't in pain, and he's sitting on the bed, and my son was getting him every beer that he liked, and I was making coffee, which was terrible, and I feel really bad that his last cup of coffee sucked. But we sat and we watched a movie together, all of us, and he listened and laughed. And I remember my daughter saying, "Is this that time?" And I was like, "No." And I kept pushing it away. I kept thinking, no, that's not going to happen. He's not going to die. God is going to heal him. And on January 22nd, for some reason, I thought to get him a catheter, because I didn't want him, urinating, I wanted him to be comfortable. Well, that catheter was so uncomfortable for him. Throughout the night, he was in so much pain, and I kept calling the hospice nurse and asking her to come. And she kept saying, "Well, it sounds like he's sleeping," because he was snoring, but he was snoring and whimpering. And I said, "He is in pain. Please come." Last time I called her, it was about 5 a.m. So, it was, we're talking from 10 a.m. to 5, or 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. I was contacting her probably every couple hours. This time I said, "If you do not come, I am going to YouTube this, and I will figure out how to take out a catheter." She's like, "I'll be there in 25. She got here. She pulled it out. She said, "Oh, he does look like he has some trauma." I'm like, "Yeah, lady, I know my husband." Then we wound up, his regular hospice nurse came in, and she was like, "Oh yeah, he's in a lot of pain. Let's take care of that." And at this point, he was pretty, there was no talking. He was just laying there, and he was whimpering, and my heart broke. And my son and my daughter, we sat with him, and my son played all these beautiful songs. One song comes to mind is "You'll Be in My Heart," from the Disney movie, and we all just sat there and cried, and it was a very touching moment. The hospice nurse did say at this point, she said, "I know you don't want a hospital bed, but I think Lou will be more comfortable in a hospital bed. I know you both wanted him to die in your bed." We moved him from our bed to the hospital bed, and he did seem much more comfortable. I sat with him, and I just said, "Hey, it's okay to go. I'm going to be okay." I mean, I was lying, but I wanted him to go. And something told me to go get my son. So I went in, I got my son, and I said, "Hey, will you do Mom a favor? Will you please tell Daddy it's okay for him to go? And he said, with a shocked look, he said, okay, Mom, I will. So he came in. I went downstairs, and my daughter was like, what do we do with Judah? That was my grandson. What do I do? What do I do? And I said, ask Judah what he wants to do, honey. If he wants to say goodbye to Pop, let him do that. And she was like, okay. So I went back upstairs, and as I went upstairs, our family does what we do is called a dance party. We have dance parties all the time. We turn music on and everybody dances. We do goofy dancing and the whole thing, and it's fun, and it's just a way for us to express. Well, I went back downstairs. I said, hey guys, we're going to do a dance party. And everyone looked at me like I was literally nuts, but there was something about it. And I walked in, I said to my son, we're going to do a dance party. And he said, okay, Mom. And the music was playing, and it was all the music that Lou loved, you know, the 70s music. I loved every song that came on, and my grandson was saying, you know, here's Pop's dance moves. And it was somber, but like beautiful, and people were swaying to the music. And there were all these songs that were, you know, being played. And Judah all of a sudden said, what's your favorite part about Pop? What's your favorite thing about Pop? And he was asking every single person, which I thought was so intuitive of a little 7-year-old. And then there was a song that came on, and it was How Deep Is Your Love? And that song by the Bee Gees is really special to me and Lou. And I had said to my son, I said, have we played this song before? And he said, no. He said, we haven't played any of the Bee Gees. And I thought, oh, wow. So I stood there and I held his hand and I rocked back and forth and listening to the song, you know, how deep is your love? How deep is your love? It was just so beautiful. And then I looked down and Lou looked at me, and his breath was just taken from him. He did not take his last breath. I saw it visibly coming out. And I remember saying, was that it? Is he gone? And I was just like panicked. And then my daughter and everybody just, you know, erupted in just deep sorrow. And Judah laid on top of my husband, and he just kept saying, oh, Pop, Pop. It was just heartbreaking. And yet that moment was so beautiful and sacred. It was like it was so weird. It was like we were on this sacred ground. It was beautiful. I won't ever forget that. I guess it's made me think I'm not afraid to die. I don't particularly want to be in pain, but I'm not afraid to die. It was so peaceful with all of us there. He was enveloped in so much love. In fact, when everybody entered the room before he died, he was snoring the loudest snore ever. It was like a roar. And my sister-in-law had actually said, like, how are you going to sleep with that snore? And I was like, you know, I've been married to a man forever. I mean, he snored his whole life, but it was so loud. It was a roar. But when everybody came into the room, he just quieted. And I even said, did you notice Dad started to quiet? And they all were like, yeah. Each one of us are grieving the loss. My children are grieving the loss of their dad. I'm grieving the loss of my best friend, my lover, my friend. I'm no longer looking at, oh, I'm so farther along. The reason that you see me here on this platform is because I believe that grief is so misunderstood, and we don't talk about it. We just don't talk about it. We don't talk about the effects of grief brain, that, you know, your body is trying to regulate itself. And these are all series that I'm going to be talking about. And so I hope that you will come and you will rest with me. I have a grief support group. It's called Grief and Me. It's a free support group, but I also do one-on-one coaching because I started becoming a coach before my husband died. I was a coach. I was coaching high-powered women to see more of themselves so that they could achieve more in what they were doing. What I do now is I see that women who are widows struggle with the moving with. We don't move on. I talk about how your thoughts actually create your actions. So when you're thinking thoughts of I'm broken, or I'm never going to get over this, or I'm always going to feel this way, those are thoughts. And I help you just go from that thought, thinking one way, to actually reframing it. And that's what I do. And that's what I love to do. I've always had that passion, and I've done it for myself. So that's why I share it. That's kind of what that transformation is. Am I over grief? No, I'm walking with it. I share this one story, and I've shared it on other platforms. Grief is like this to me. When you, as someone who is grieving, start out, those first few months of grief, it feels like you have been injected with the worst pain ever. You've been injected with this poison that you can't escape it. There's nothing that is going to take this pain away. You are in excruciating pain. You can't think, you can't reason. But as time goes on, it starts to become like a scratchy sweater. This sweater that you can't take off. It's on. It doesn't come off. It's scratchy, it's uncomfortable, but it becomes part of you. And because you can't take it off, you start to find moments where you don't notice it as much, until maybe a song comes up, until maybe there's a moment that you remember, or even just going outside and maybe the breeze reminds you of something, and all of a sudden you remember, oh yeah, I'm wearing that sweater. At some point, I believe that that sweater is going to become a cashmere sweater, where you feel the softness of his love, where the memories aren't as painful but more beautiful. And if you're wanting to connect with me, please go to the link in my bio. There's where you're going to get into grief and me. I have a new course called A New Way to Stand. And as always, a one-to-one session with someone. It's 6-month container, but you're more than welcome to link in my bio and go ahead and sign up.